cool. Had some response on doing some research, and I think that's the right way to go. So we're not going to hear the crickets quite yet. And so I need to make a statement correction on something I told you the last few weeks, only in that I didn't actually extend what I wanted you to research, and that was caught by somebody. And I think impliedly I gave you, or not so discreetly, I gave you one of the answers to the question regarding the territorial courts of the United States government, United States District Courts, USDC courts, and their territoriality, not Article 3. So I want to make sure that you understand that this is very important to start to get about the system we are under that isn't. The thing that everyone complains about isn't really the system that we should be having. And so I think I said it correctly 2 weeks ago, but apparently, and I didn't go back and check, I may have misquoted the statute that I want you to go read to understand this point and to figure this out for yourself. I want you to, those of you that are interested, and I do really believe this is very, very important. It's really part and parcel to our lawsuit and how we didn't use the existing corrupt courts. We actually stepped around them. And it's to understand this thing called jurisdiction, authority and power to hear and determine causes, subject matter causes. And so I want to make sure I get this stated correctly, that I'm referring now and also referring to Cornell.edu website for this, the law section, at 28 USC Chapter 5. And you're going to go from 81 to 131. And I gave a different section and a different chapter. I think I may have misspoken. I'll take the word of the listener, and we got that worked out. And I want you to go to 28 USC 81 to 131. So when I made that apparent mistake, I went back and this is a long while back research, and I said, well, what am I missing potentially? And so I went into 132. And I want you now to add that, 132, because you also why you need to go to the Cornell website, and I will have a link this time, so there's no mistake in the broadcaster. I want you to read 132, and then I want you to read the notes. Go in the Cornell site, they have a notes tab. Read those notes. That's how you start to decipher what went on. And I want you to pay special attention, though not exclusive attention, to the extension that happened in 132, the notes, the extension that's explained to you in 132. Because you have to listen. You got to put your little beanie, your thought beanie on, your historic beanie. Put yourself in the moment, in the time. When they start talking about places, actually ask yourself, did that place exist or not? And if it didn't, you have to put out a little thought. Okay, if it didn't exist and they extended that to there, where did they extend it, and what remains? And you're going to see 132 is actually pretty insightful. I forgot all about this. It kind of starts to lead you into the answers for how they do the what I called a long time ago the pea in a cup. It's how they move things on you. And so you really have to pay attention to this one. Again, it's hard to explain to you how you're going to get the tools that you need, but you get them by studying. And you start learning how to read what you're watching. And you learn how to see really the invisible right before you. So I appreciate the feedback on people finding out that I had said didn't quite get the whole of the matter. Interestingly, where I sent everybody the first week, even if it was a misspeak last week, which I may have said Title 18, so I apologize for that. Title 28 is where you want to go. You would have still gotten the answer for what I offered for you to go read, because the districts before that will not give you the answer. They're just a list of the rest that were subverted by the territorial system. And some of you will be astute enough to watch and see those are also relevant to that 1871 code. So instead of complaining about the 1871, complaining that we don't have Article 3s or whatever they aren't, and that we're only in districts, and for all you big people who want to put corporations on a big pedestal about how to destroy everything, and you think that's the answer, go look at the 1871 Act when you read this section. And you'll see I use this in order to take out the system that was trying to be the oppression. So, thank you. I do appreciate that someone caught me. I said, if you have a problem, let me know. Well, if I make a mistake, sometimes I do that. I hear mistakes periodically, not so bad. This one wasn't so bad, but I know that this is such a technical study to understand really what the courts are and aren't, or when you are looking at courts and why. For a lot of points, you can start analyzing why things are failing and why bad answers. See, if these courts don't have jurisdiction, it doesn't matter what they say, does it? And so now we're going to go for. I accepted that as a win for us to keep track of ourselves as our studies and proper studies. You'll learn how. I'm going to anticipate if you're that close, you're going to learn the truth of what that law. So that's those statutes have to tell us, and how to start to work your way through this battlefield. So I accepted that was a neat feedback as more of a success to me. And so now we'll go to the broadcast under the normal terms of the majority of what's going on in the country. Yeah, that's right. They're still just loving winter. They're all the crickets are getting drowned right now, depending on where you're at. But yeah, we're not done with all the cricket sounds are going to be here for a while. I would hope different. And in this regard, for all those of you on the Prodcast or Pastcast, this will be BTWRLM 202. And I always hope I get that number right. And I don't. I guess the day I start forgetting, I'll know I'm near the end of it all here. But so let's move into the standards by which we can look and see and tell the future. And we don't need the judges, and we don't need the courts, and we don't need attorneys, and we don't need someone deciding for us when we have a basis in the foundations of what should be, that notwithstanding we're being deprived of these things. Just to hit you a couple things so you can see it's you too can do this. On this Trump travel ban thing, and I'm not into I'm not into Trump. I'm not into the politics this way. I'm not into even what they're doing in some regard, unless it's for what we need, and we're going to try and bring up people again. Not despite the destruction it looks like it's coming. We're working to try and bring up people on their, hopefully, first of all, livelihood side, and then that will generate jobs, notwithstanding whatever they want to do. And hopefully it'll put people in a better position to weather the what looks to be a destruction coming. But Trump put on a travel ban, and everyone gets all in this rah-rah emotional stuff and says, okay, yeah, good, stop the Muslims. Well, there's another thing going on, but remember I told you the standard, and I want you to just follow this part. I said it doesn't look like he can do what he did, because you can't give license to somebody and then strip it back away. And if you remember, what I've said over the last couple of weeks was he would still have to, there was going to have to be an agreement that the green cards, the fulfillment of the process, the government's agreement that everything was right, and the so-called license that you're given to be here would have to be allowed, and then they might be able to adjust things for the future ones to come in the process. That today it just hits the Twitter sphere as far as part of the news that I get to talk about this stuff. Trump's new travel plan revealed. So in other words, he's not even going to, where this guy Trump says he's going to see you in court, in the Supreme Court to appeal that. He's not going to appeal that. And I don't know really, there's lots of reasons why you won't appeal a case, but I don't know what the reason is. It'd be nice to know they listened behind the woodshed and found out to appeal from a bad jurisdiction probably wasn't going to get him very far. I kind of doubt that, but it'd be kind of nice to know that, wouldn't it? Behind the woodshed actually has that kind of force and effect. The ripple, the butterfly effect goes so quickly and so powerfully. That what they said, he's going to put a new travel ban instead of seeing him in court. And so now we see a little bit of ding in the armor here about him wanting to go to court all the time. He says now there's going to be a phase-in period, and green card holders will be spared. That's exactly what I told you would have to happen. So they've now seen the light, if you will, and you're going to have access to the due process that's supposed to be available to people, even if it's the foreigners. Because remember, if you're an American, you're on the battlefield in America, you don't have the right to due process. So don't underestimate this point, this problem. And as I quickly see here, what caused my attention, please don't confuse the 202 episode here, and that's an estimated number, with the year 2002. if that makes a difference. So it's 202 is the episode number. So here we go. We could predict the future. We didn't need attorneys, and this is not really that hard. This is strictly looking at enough, reading enough to understand there's just certain things that are supposed to go on, and that was how we were different. That we were supposed to be better, and that all that better stuff has been stripped away. And now we see that there is this due process. We see the principle that even now the president, whoever told him and finally figured it out, whether or not they got that information from behind the woodshed, they realize they can't really take away what they gave. And they have to kind of go back and start that over. So instead of fighting it, he's going to go ahead and apparently rewrite a new travel ban, which it complies and comports to due process, essentially. And I want us to see the foundation working over and over, and that it has to work. And so here's the other thing that just keeps yelling at me. It only happened that way because someone stood up against the problem, the violation, the crime. It doesn't matter to me who did it and for what their reason is. It doesn't matter to me that someone who actually stopped him is actually advancing an agenda that does destroy the country. The point is that these things are there and they don't work until someone says, whoa. And then in the right way, notwithstanding the jurisdictional questions, as I bring them up. What happens is when you and I go in, we're not the attorneys, we're not the ACLU, the part of the destruction. We're not the system, we're not the Bar Association, so they treat us a whole lot different. We have to have a higher standard of understanding. Now, we shouldn't have, but this is the war. This is what we're in. This is the battlefield. You can deny all you want. You can make up your mythological, philosophical lands and utopias, but there's a reality that you're going to have to deal with, and if you don't, it'll deal with you. And so, again, we can see the future. We can see what they should have done. And now when he does it right, more correctly, I don't know about right, you never know, that's always kind of an interesting question. He does it more right. He doesn't deny people that have fulfilled the law. And he had no power to do that anyway. That was really predictable. And so they moved a little bit quick, and they got caught. But they got caught by whom? Someone like you, or not. I mean, somebody. It's not like you and me with not being the Bar Association. But someone stepped up and said, no, you exceeded your authority. You were authorita to the point you tried to deny people that were given license or permit, and then denied them the right that they had, and they complied with to meet. And you don't have that power. You handed. See the other underlying point here. The government, sitting in this position to qualify things, exceeded its authority once it granted permission. And so you see that we can find limits. These are, like, to me, I tell you, this is not news. This is all notice. If we just start learning, if we didn't know anything before, we get to see how things are actually there to be done at least more correctly. But it takes someone to step up. What I've been trying to get you all to consider, and it doesn't have to be this stuff, just the wrong you need to make right is the thing you need to go after. It doesn't have to be that big. It could be just you're now analyzing what a thing you need to be done better in your life. It really all kind of seems to boil down to the same thing over and over and over. And that's kind of an interesting confirmation, I think. I'm learning to look at it that way. No matter where I go, I can give a certain answer. Now, you take the facts of a specific condition and you then apply them, but you apply them all to the same form. And there's no form paper. There's just the form of how the due process, or just what makes things correct, are. And they're pretty universal that way. So I'm not trying to make everything too obscure here. And I guess I'm blown away by the fact that not many people know this. So let's move on here. How I turned it, not me, excuse me. This is an article I'm reading, a title. How I turned a traffic ticket into the constitutional trial of the century is this gentleman's tale to you, and I guess to me it's an aggrandizement of the constitutional trial of the century. It wasn't, but notwithstanding that, remember when you get into traffic and you realize that you're in a traffic court, that's trafficking court. You're in commerce, and so you have no constitutional rights there. That actually you're dealing with. You're actually dealing with an administrative adulteration, whereby they claim that you're doing a civil harm, but they treat you as a criminal process. See, no one's gotten figured that part out. Well, we have, but I mean, the criminals won't recognize it. So you just have to act the way you're gonna. You do what you're gonna do, and they're gonna be the criminals they be. And you hope at one point, and this is why I keep talking, there's enough of us that start to bring accountability, because I think that's really the core. I don't care where I listen and what I listen to. The bottom line is everyone starts doing blah, 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 blah. They talk about all the swamp monsters. They talk about all the things that are wrong. They line it out A to Z, and then no one talks about what we now do with that information in order to stop it. We just let it happen. This gentleman stepped up and fought of all things a traffic camera ticket. And I thought this was important, that although, despite his, he's a professor, and despite his aggrandizement of a constitutional trial of the century, where he thought it was a great thing, and this is not a big deal, but he gets the cop to perjure himself on the stand. Now, first of all, that takes you not just giving in, but understanding process, and then walking into the court and doing this. You have to ask these guys, you get them on the stand, and you have to make them testify against themselves. Why I tell you the point of first contact is so important, because if you don't do that, you can't ask the really big important questions, which will get you to the point that, as I've told you before, a friend of mine, a long time ago, I explained to him this thing about the person, and that the government only can address persons, and that person is a legal entity that has obligations and duties in the state, a very particular place, and that's determined by your application. And so, you get on the stand and you ask the cop after you've presented this at the first point of contact, which is usually where they're perjuring themselves in the mischaracterization of your use of the highway, and you bring forward the idea that, and you usually have a document in your hand, you can hand them, that says that you're not the person. And I'm just going through summary things. I'm not going to give you, again, I can't go through the whole how it works. Then you get them on the stand and you ask them, are you a person? You are a person. Actually, what you do is you have to do the inverse. You ask them if you're a man. And so my friend went and did all that, and it came out, as I've told you before, that the officer finally, begrudgingly, admitted he was a man. And as soon as the testimony came out of the cop's mouth in this case, the judge interfered and stated, he made his own objection, and he stated that he wouldn't and couldn't accept that testimony, that my friend was a man and not a person, because if that was made known generally, the courts could not prosecute anyone. And so to me, that was the big confirmation revelation done longer than a decade ago. That this is pretty small potatoes what this professor comes on a traffic camera thing. I'm kind of going through this just a little bit just to go through the points that he's talking about here that you all need to see. You need to see that the not to the point that it defeats you and you say you give up and you throw your hands up. You need to see what it's going to take when you finally start engaging in your intention to do better, or your intention to stop whining about what's going on and do something about it. You need to see what you're up against. And this was a pretty good tale on what you're up against. And so once you prepare for that, then I'm asking you to go back into the rules and watch, and you learn how to defeat what they try to do. In this case, he went in, he thinks the end-all be-all story is that he got the cop to perjure himself, but he doesn't go on to go and attack that guy's certification or any of that stuff. So to me, that's still crickets as far as bringing real accountability. But he does point out that if the way he brought this out, and he put up with a lot of nonsense, you have to see what kind of nonsense you're going to be put up with. And you'll realize this is the same nonsense that every system in every department of government, wherever you go, will do to you. In fact, without getting into it, even asking questions of the county clerk for records. I'm amazed at how many people, and thank you all that are tracking down on your patent stuff. How many people I'm getting communication with where the clerk gets hostile just because you ask for a question about a record is a constant here. It's not surprising to me. It's surprising in the context of the law, because what's the big harm? What's the big skin off their nose? But here it is. You're dealing in things that they understand are the notice to the world that if you knew the status you were supposed to show and could show by evidence, that they could not prosecute anybody. They would not, as I'm showing you, you start getting into the grant side of your life, and they cannot even trespass. As soon as they jump the chasm, they're a criminal. That this will give you, I mean, try to do, I say everyone should jump in and do their traffic court cases. That's a good way to learn. So how I learned about the rudiments of doing court cases. My very first ticket that I was in, I've been blessed to find two people that had been fighting their battle for probably 10 years before me. And I said, is that all? Is that how you do this? And he goes, yeah. And then they showed me a couple books. And I said, that's all this is? And then I went to task. And I'm here today from it. But that's where it started. See, you're just going to pay money in a traffic ticket anyway. And that's one of the ways you can engage this, to actually start to learn. Don't go in like you think of constitutional rights, because you have none. Go in to understand the process. And so this professor of law goes into a court and he starts fighting, and he puts up with all kinds of nonsense. You need to see this is what the system's willing to do when you start to come onto the point. You'll see in this a whole lot of little things, and I can't address all the little things he didn't do, but it doesn't matter. He ends up showing, and they end up dropping this thing, and he ends up being able to prevail against a camera ticket. And you'll see how they just sign. This is what their DAs will do in almost everything. The DAs will take the officer's report, and the DA's charging you. And no one seems to notice that one, and so the DA slips out after committing a felony and fraud on the court. But the DA takes what he claims to be evidence against you, and that is underneath the rules, that's a fraud on the court. It's a fraud, and then a fraud on the court. A fraud on the court is not fraud. A fraud on the court is a term, and it means a destruction or a substantial interference with due process and the ability to do justice. And so you have the fraud, and then you have the fraud on the court to do justice. And all these people are involved in this. And you'll see the cop in this case signs that a picture was sufficient under the law to get the owner of the vehicle harmed. And this guy goes through and explains and shows you, at least loosely, what it takes to go against this and what you're going to have to be prepared for. I thought this was a very good, if nothing else, it is a win. But it's not a win in the context that he didn't follow through to start bringing an attempt to bring accountability to the oppressor. And so I'm going to call it on the other side of the crickets, even though this guy was a professor in law, and he knew that he was going to be up against stuff, and he knew what he was after, and he did eventually prevail, in Alabama, I should say, also. And the universality of this was so fun, so important to see. You have to understand across the country, the same oppression happens in all of these systems. So again, confirmation, it's coming from a singular source. That you have to know the reality you're after. He calls it a constitutional trial of a century. It wasn't. This was just him going through the process that is non-constitutional. Otherwise, he wouldn't be treated like this. And so you have to understand these things. Stop thinking that you know so much, and you think you see what you're being told to yourself. You're proving other things, and I want you to be aware of that. Another process problem where people are doing it wrong, and I did my best, folks, and I don't know who took cognizance of this or not. And I hear more stuff coming out contrary to really what the law says. But I did see this interesting statement, and I know lots of people will not agree with this, but that's not the point. I'm trying to bring it up. I'm not here to argue with the points. I'm here to try and get people to understand there's processes that are going on that, in my mind, I mean, when you look across the spectrum of everybody that complains, are fully not understood by many people in society. And when they're not fully understood, then they're deemed to be an evil that they really aren't. They're a different type of evil, and then that evil then it looks like authority, which you rail against, but you're railing against the wrong thing. In a way, Trump coming back and writing the executive order to do it into law shows you that there's a law, and he was going to have to be complied with. It showed that someone had to force him to do that, and we actually see the system working. Whatever my opinion is on what his action is, we actually see there is a system that functions to check and balance, but it requires you. And this is, I keep wanting to show you, and so you have to do it right. It's not because I like that. It's not that I like being imposed. As I tell you, the grantees in this country, the land disposed to the people, to be imposed at any way is a felony when it comes by government. And we ought not have to deal with it. And yet we do. That's just evidence that we weren't vigilant enough and we're not bringing the accountability that ought be there. If it's not, it really is there. But we have, again, the seats of decision are the organized criminals. And I know maybe new listeners may not understand. They may think that I'm just piping up and I don't want to keep repeating and touting what we do. But this is all a public record, not my opinion, about the criminality that we face. And the reality is we have to address that. Again, as I want to, if I can defer to Thomas Jefferson's statement, it takes the education to motivate the mass of the population in order to bring the restoration to the law. We are beyond, the system is beyond itself, and so we're required to step up, and we don't, we could choose the Second Amendment, but I think Lincoln explained how ill-advised that would be. And so we then now have to reassess what the battlefield is that's being set up against us. But it requires a different application. And yes, part of it is understanding this administrative imposition. But once you understand it, you realize that's 2 steps before you get to where you need to go. And if you can make the record in the administrative side, and with my view, have a better record to make than even what they'll tell you to make, like this facilitated public comment nonsense. When you finally see for what it is, you call out the felony that is. In fact, I did this. I'll be maybe getting to that. I did that on another Twitter. Explained in 3 short phrases how this thing works out, and how you address it. And then you don't have to deal with the nonsense. But I did my best, folks, as best I could, and as simply as I could make the statement about the pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline. And one little story comes up. And it might be a walking away shot at the protesters. I don't know. I'm not looking at it from that standpoint. I'm looking at it from why we fail as the people, whomever we are, as the people. Pipeline exec compares Dakota protesters to terrorists. And I did my best to have expand on that, to let people put in the record the thing that would make their protest actually lawful in the place they were doing it. And lots of people got mad at me, and I noticed for a while the listenership was down, and I don't know what to do about that, folks. I'm trying to instruct. I'm trying, and I'm wholly open to error. Like I was corrected in misquote. It was a misstatement. 28 U.S.C. 81 was what I should have said, and there should have been no. But I know my mind was working on something I was actually studying earlier in the week on criminal things. So. It's just what happens real time live out of my head, and I want to check for that. So we fixed that. So here we are again, and now the pipeline exec compares Dakota protesters to terrorists. A lot of people will go, this guy's just whatever. I don't even know what they're going to say. But in this case, I want to ask a reverse question. What did the protesters do to not look like terrorists? Well, I came on week after week for a while, and I explained what they had to do by an objective basis. And they did nothing. In fact, got mad at me. Some did anyway, or just didn't listen, at least, and then took no action on top of the facts and the response they were getting. They took no new type of action. My view on this is that this guy's making an assertion that the poor protesters were terrorists, and I'm saying in the totality of where we are today in battlefield America, how are the protesters not terrorists when they didn't produce a better record that was, in my estimation, clearly deficient? Not by my estimation as far as my standard, by the standard of what is expected of us in the competing societies that we have. The society itself is a divisive type thing, and we feed right into all that. It's really fascinating. I watch people they keep banging their head against the same wall, and they don't really want to listen. So I don't want to get too much deeper. A lot of people want to understand what I just said. The protesters are not terrorists. How can you say that? Whatever, folks. Just in a way, get over yourself. There's a reason why this guy says this, and he can back it up, and I'm saying that I think it was the failed obligations and duties that the people that were making the claim adverse to the pipeline did not fulfill by an objective basis. And then we see what did they do, folks. They left the place a total mess, these protesters. So much for water protection. This is just a big setup. I just can't see one thing after the next, and I'm shaking my head. Folks, you can do it better. Why aren't you doing it better? That's my only opinion on this, actually. We have to do this better. We can't leave these. These are not examples that we want to leave. We set ourselves up for this pipeline exec to say that. And so I want to come back and say, not to denounce anything. I need us to start thinking in a better way. How are the people that would call themselves protesters not terrorists, given you could see that there was no record to support them in one little bit? They didn't do anything for themselves. They weren't in the place that they said. They didn't actually have the authorities that they claim. They admitted that and was adjudicated as such. I don't know even if I was a far-off type of look, which I'm really not that far off, because I'm telling you the process that they failed in is exactly what I have to address every day. It's just on the other side of the country. And it's the same oppression we're all feeling. How I understand this so intimately. My question is, in the actions underneath the new battlefield of America, really, this is the evidence of the failure of the government to protect you. And no one wants to talk about that either. This is a facial dereliction and fiduciary breach in the government itself, to create you to be an enemy combatant without due process. And I've been talking about this for years, why we go to crickets. This is, to me, there's multiple levels about this statement that I want to call your attention to. I'm not getting into my agreement or disagreement with the overall thing. Actually, I must say this. I am in disagreement. I am really disappointed with the obstinance of the Indian people to not actually step up in the right way and then complain. This article actually says, they were, it was the police that were the terrorists. I explained how they weren't the terrorists, even though I didn't like hearing about some woman getting her arm blown off. People being hosed down to, hypothermia, freezing and freezing temperatures. I don't like any of that. But there was nothing in the record to say that they were there correctly. Nothing. And they really admitted to. I told you that the very first broadcast. I said even the attorneys that they have supposedly being, protecting the environment, the environmental usurpers, using the Indians as stalking horses, even they admitted there was no cause. And I said, you better, if that's the case, you better fix the record so you do have one. And in a way, I'm glad to see in some things these protests going down because they look like the insanity they are. I want us to do better. I'm just going to ask you that over and over again. Whether you end up taking the mantle on your own, whether you take the baton, whether if you really can find something that's wrong that you need to be made right, I want you to think more clearly about this very real world battlefield we live in, and they use all this, these people use all this against us, and it's multidimensional beyond what we actually see. And I can't even get us beyond maybe like the first point. I was just commenting to somebody, I thought it was going to only take a year for the miners to understand they deal in a grant, and that grant is, it can't be destroyed, and it can't be altered. And I thought that was going to be, it's written right there, simple. The first 1866 law, it says it right there, this is a grant. Okay, we get it done in a year. I just figured if we get the word out, it'll take about a year to get the word out. That'll set that foundation, and then we'll move from there. We had a whole bunch of things we still have to do. Do you know it's been over a decade now, and I still can't get everyone to understand that it's a grant and what that means? No, not everybody, but there's a small group of us that understand this. But do you realize it's taken over a decade? I can't get people to understand I can't force you to understand. It's like pushing a limp noodle uphill and expecting that we're getting progress. Over a decade. If I go through that too much, I have to really back off of it. But I'll say this much: you realize it's not wasted, but I'll put it this way because I haven't seen the fruition of it. I've wasted over a decade of my life on this. Then, at least in them. Anyone who doesn't actually listen to what I'm saying and do as I'm trying and prove out or disprove out, and then come back to me and show me that your trail that you went down and where it went right or wrong. Very few people do that. Very few. And I'm wasting my life, literally, and I don't even want to get too much into all that. It's just the thing I found I need to do. And somehow I'm told and I'm supported to continue to do it. And so I'm going to get off about me wasting my life where no one wants to listen. I'm saying if you don't listen, you can predict the future by a lot of the things I say. Strictly limited to process side of how things were supposed to go in a society that lived by law and not the rule of men. And everyone gives it over to the rule of the men, and then in a bureaucracy, the bureaucrats. And they never take the more proper step. And it really gets frustrating to me to watch it over and over. That I ask, again, by this pipeline exec stating the protesters to be terrorists, I'm asking, how are they not? I don't want to hear about your opinion. I want to see, show me the evidence that you placed in the record somewhere, the multiple times that were offered, that you weren't. Because I need to understand, what did I miss? And I keep looking over this, something that I really don't have time for, but it's all part of us. We are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and we cannot fear, but we cannot be complacent either. We still have to take the steps in the right direction. Part of the pipeline thing, and what this does the designating of the name to terrorist does, even though I can almost see, I can actually find the definition of how that was a terrorism. And that's why I was asking anybody, you better make a record so that you don't look like that. That's what they're trying to make you look like. And so now that record wasn't made, they are now free to say that. And you can everybody can be yelling at me or turning the dial or whatever they want to, but the bottom line is that you haven't learned a lesson and allowed yourself to be even named this. And this seems to be the new thing. If I can put a name on you, and I've told you before, someone who names you and it sticks, they own you. They own you. And so another story pops up here, written by, I guess, Brandon Smith here, rebranding liberty as evil, as globalists prepare to blame populists for everything. And so they're focusing on this term populist that just sprang up. For me, the point is the rebranding of something, that you allow by your actions to be rebranded. I'm not talking to any one of you in particular. This is just really a functional thing. That if they can tie you into a group and they give you a title, you can be controlled by that pretty readily, and that's not unknown at all. This is what they call the double speak. This is where peace becomes war, and this is the type of dynamic that goes on. They stick you on the wrong side of it, and part of that is us walking into that and allowing it. Part of us, and it's helped by ignorance in the terms in the beginning. Why I'm so I don't know. Actually, I don't know what I am. It's getting beyond me to even try to begin to know where to begin to explain it. This thing, the anarchy thing, the statist thing. It's just such an ignorance of the actual thing that's actually now being used. It's really quite funny in some regard. It's like everyone's being led by the nose by their sense of what they think they were going to be doing, and it's really just it was a setup. It was a place for them, a low spot for you to go to, and it's all based on you not really wanting to address the real thing that's going on. But I'll take a little reading here. Is that today in the editor's note of taking Brandon's point into account, what is happening now appears to be a mass hoax in that crowds from liberty movement, the truth movement, the conservative movement, the populist movement, and several of their labels are being goaded into supporting an overreaching executive branch, a fresh rally for war in the Middle East, and a brutal police state crackdown at home. A crackdown that appears to be developing in the effort to deport many illegal immigrants, ban migrants from the Middle East countries, and beat back protesting and rioting liberal crowds. Well, those are all set up, those crowds, and they're doing it again the wrong way. Protesters, I told you, this is not answered by going in the streets. I told you this years and years ago. You have to understand the system that's against you, the oppression. You have to truly understand it, and then you address that. This article goes on, this editor's note goes on to comment, there are so many fronts to this game that many people have lost their identity and completely abandon the principles in effort to cheer on their candidate, whether this is Trump in the White House, Bernie or Hillary outside the White House, or anyone else in between. As Brandon Smith has pointed out in many of his previous articles, there has been many short-term gains against the globalists, and they can never true to defeat the liberty movement in particular, if and only if liberty-minded individuals maintain their principles of freedom as an ideal, of protection of the Bill of Rights, of economic freedom for individuals and small businesses, etc. If people only hold on to liberty and other high-minded ideals when they advocate candidates, movements, or issues, we could hardly go wrong. On the other hand, if people look the other way to back a particular individual, their entire stance, movement, policies can be debunked and set aside. If it can be shown that people originally advocated liberty, freedom, have instead endorsed and participated in evil, in unconstitutional acts, and ultimately defeated themselves. For those who advocate personal freedom to the extreme point of self-reliance, off-grid living, and readiness for all emergencies, those people can never be defeated as long as they live up to their principles. Somewhere in there is a hope for future. The rest is dragging us down into chaos and agonizing poverty and dependence. Now, excuse me for chuckling a little bit, into chaos. That is the anarchy. But that's not really an anarchy, because that's the plan. And I guess I'll touch this a little bit. Anarchy is really exists only in the form where a society does exist. And the anarchist is simply not believing or agreeing with the existing structure. I'm asking you to be careful that you're not actually fighting against the criminals in the existing structure and you've misplaced your focus. But notwithstanding that, interesting he brings up principles. What are we behind the woodshed for? At least aesthetically, behind the woodshed to do but learn the principles. It's what I've been doing all the time. I've been trying to tell you how this works. This is in my mind, an on-point view as somebody is coming on to the very thing I've been doing for years. Not to tout my horn at all, but to say, you better focus into what's going on. Now, what have I done? He even brings up the idea of identity. People have lost their identity. Folks, your identity is what the government determines for you, probably by an act that you did. And that was done by your voluntary hand. So your voluntarism is being used exactly the way you wanted to, but you don't want to agree to that. But identity is exactly what they want us to focus on. And identity politics. You're looking at politics. It's connected to police, political. You wonder why we're in a police state. You wonder why Trump's putting military people on the civil side of the government. This is all the war against us, being set up right before us. Identity is what we're focused on. I'm telling you, you got to get away from that. Don't let an identity attach to you. Get into your status. And then understand what you really are as opposed to what the fraud is that's put upon you, and understand how to change that. That's not about talking or chatting. This is about figuring certain things out and making records when they are available to be made. I did appreciate what the author here says, the editor, and I apologize for not knowing his name. I don't really get into all these things. I'm really looking at subject matter that is a real things that are being dealt with that apparently Brandon Smith speaks to. I think I remember that. I don't want him to get really into what's really being said as far as the logic or if it's true or whether I agree with it. It's really not important there. I just want to point out that there's an insight here in the editor's comment that is touching everything I'm trying to tell you, that we have to avoid in one regard and embrace what the truth part are and make the record of is all important with how they're taking us down. If you don't have an identity, see, all the identities, no matter what you call yourself, are still within a structure, and people are missing this point. And so, when I say in the state, and I keep telling you, you got to start learning what that is, or what they are, or what they might be. And it's particularly, you can just go across jurisdictional things. This weird and funny word, jurisdiction. The authority to hear and determine causes by which you've agreed, volunteered into, by some way, even if it's the trespass of presuming upon you an identity or status for your benefit. That's the really killer one that I started to, when I finally realized what they had done there, that foreign jurisdictions such as the corporate state, underneath the Bar Association and its Model Business Corporation Act, would do something for you for your benefit, justifying their plunder against you, is really the type of thing you have to focus your mind on, that these people are willing to do to justify their plunder. And so I want to go back just to this. Very important, I thought this article was pointing out some things. The rebranding of liberty as evil. And then I said, look at our reallibertymedia.com, and I'm beyond media. I'm beyond the concept of the liberty where I'm telling you, you better learn the principles underlying all this. And that's the narrow path you make sure you hold to, and you don't let anybody wrest that from you for any reason. This is the only thing I think I come here every week, now at 202 now episodes since we've been counting on RLM alone, to tell you. You know, I'm pausing, not intentionally. My mind just kind of, it starts to fly through lots of ideas, and I just kind of discard. I say, really, well, I'm not talking no more, I'm thinking. I have so much to tell you, but if I can't get folks beyond themselves, we're really in a lot of trouble. And I don't know, it's going to be other people. It's going to be that remnant, as we hear, that will eventually, hopefully, maybe in the future, listen to this pastcast, that maybe it'll be the people in the future that finally get it. Maybe it's the little ones coming up now that finally they just realize that they're bound up, they're chained, they're gagged. You know, there's a song about that. They're focused on Chicago, I think, too. So tell you how the circle of servitude keeps coming round and around. At any rate, just interesting. We start looking with new eyes about even the story that we're told, his story, the story of the victor of the plunder, and the one plundering. It really has some real interesting, I call it the mandala effect. It's the effect that you can go and draw circles, pretty circles, to scribe out your servitude existence. And everyone will complain about it, but no one will actually do much right about stopping it. So, rebranding things in a way, not in name now, but in function. I've been against the blockchain where I felt it would be going. What I felt was that they were using this to get people excited, the same liberty movement, if you will, the same anarcho-capitalist type idea, the same free market type idea. These are all setups. Your free market is you having something of substance in your pocket to make free will contracts without imposition. That's the beginning and the end in my mind about this. And then you start stepping into these things that are provided for you. Again, Silent Weapons, Quiet Wars, they provide a place for you to plug in. It's not that I even dislike the blockchain at some point, but I see these things offered to us as tools for our destruction. There's a rebranding going on, if I can put it in these terms, on what they're going to set us up into. There's a rebranding, and this is kind of interesting because in mining districts had something available to them, and we actually adopted our logo. If anybody wants to see it, go to jeffersonminingdistrict.com. It's the miner tugging on a reluctant mule named Old Gov, as we tried to coax old Gov to do the right thing. And so we've adopted that logo as actually as a brand. So understand how these words can be helpful. That's not a copyright. That's a brand, and that's specific to Mining District Authority. Just like all other producers, you have brands for ranching and the cows and things like that. For identity, you're identifying a thing and a possession right, aren't you? So here's they're rebranding this idea using the blockchain. The first government, I told you and I warned you about this. I said this is where they're going because they're going to do something. And you're going to miss one of the major factors. It's, as we were talking in the chat room, and I apologize for not remember now last week. Might have been Rome's, but I can't remember now. And I'm really intrigued by this, and I'm really trying to work this out on trying to find the better side of it. And it was told to me that the blockchain can be made as a perfect guaranteed record. And that's a powerful argument in some regard. But then I told you that's not the originals. And then it was told to me, well, but the originals can be made, the signatures can be made part of that contract. And I said, okay, but I need to have access to that, and I mean in a physical way. And yeah, it sounds good, but I don't know if that's actually the county records I have when I go down and get the independent record from the book. That's why they did the book, the reel, the page. There's a certain reason, law reason behind all that the blockchain doesn't actually do. That my other problem with the blockchain, even if we could say that was evidence, and I'm showing people that are doing their patents how when you get into this, how you can find that the abstract is not the actual evidence when you start finding problems that the abstract is not explaining. That this blockchain, the first government to secure land titles on the Bitcoin blockchain, expands the project, is a problem also of possession of the blockchain. And I've suggested to you, or more than suggested to you, how they went and did derivative values. It's the fabrication of it's an unlimited source of so-called currency. How they did the so-called toxic investments and mortgages, which was a theft also by MERS. They are now utilizing in the Republic of Georgia the same court, remember, that said that, wait a minute, unless you hold so much, you're not marketing. If you have so much marijuana, that's self-evident proof you're not marketing it if it's almost so much. Because to market means, or to be in possession for sale, you have to have enough to sustain a business. And so many grams doesn't do it. It's self-evident proof you're not doing it. This is the same place. They're adopting, if you think these places are behind the times, they're adopting. They have a vote of confidence for a fledgling technology. The Republic of Georgia committing and signing ceremony in Tbilisi on Tuesday to use blockchain network to validate property-related government transactions. Now, government transactions may not be private transactions, but I'm going to extend this to everybody's transactions because I don't know the land laws in the Republic of Georgia. I do know quite a bit about the land transactions in America. And these are private transactions. And if they're done right, they're not by sale. They're not by ad valorem of value for a legal entity. They're done by grant, by real people. That the blockchain can't support that, and it can also be possessed, that the whole listing can then be inventoried for their ad valorem value, and that can be monetized to the one who holds it. And who holds these? But the private public partnership entity stakeholder that intercepted and interceded in this to interfere. That we're seeing, folks, it's been writing on the wall. It's not my fear, I got nothing in it, but if I can say my fear is coming on me. The blockchain, the cashless society, the paperless office is a way to take centralized control, monetization power, and take it away from you, because inside this blockchain they also have what? We heard it in the other, weeks and months ago. They have the power to levy and control your property. They have the right to seize it. And then it's a pain. I don't know if you ever try to do this after even a lis pendens is filed on a property. It's a pain to release that imposition. And this is the power that you're giving to a private entity when you go to blockchain, that now it's in the news. If you didn't believe me just a couple months ago, it's on. And remember I talked about Chicago again, the center of destruction. Chicago and Cook County experimenting with this blockchain. You're watching the destruction of your property rights by a rebranding of what it is going to be represented by. And it's possessed by a private party to control. And so there's more to this. I don't even know what, we'll go on and on. For as much as I don't understand really about the technology, I know what it's used for. I knew what it was about. I know how, and I just ran across this and I just remembered it, flashed in my mind. It didn't surprise me, but I was surprised to find out where I understood the author that told me to understand what happened in 2008 about the MERS imposition and the clouding of all the titles of property through the financial system's interference, is the same guy now that we find that is promoting this blockchain. And as I say that, is that in this story? Is that in the story? Maybe it is. How did I learn from it? But this story. Is this fake news? I'm going to say I don't think so. And this is how you have to pair this through. There he is. He is in this story. Let me go back and read it then. The Bitfury and Republic of Georgia initiative is just one of the several collaborations. Collaboration is part of the consensus process, which is a felony against you, aimed at creating blockchain-based land titling services. They always make services. They charge you extra fees on top of all this construction, and they possess the dominion over whatever they do. You have natural resource services we have to deal with it. Folks, those are only amenities. And we don't even, we in the general don't understand that that's nothing but services on amenities. It has nothing to do with the land. It has nothing to do with substantive power. It has nothing to do with actual value in something. And so you see all the same words used by the consensus process implementation right here as I'm reading it. But read parenthetically here, such software is also being created in Sweden, Honduras, and Cook County in Chicago with startups. Did you know all that story I talked to you months and months ago would lead to this? Folks, here it is. I guess I don't appreciate what I do read. I read through pretty quickly, and I pick all this stuff up, and I said there's just so much to talk about. Sometimes I don't get down in reading these stories, and I tell you, there's tons of stuff to see that are confirmatory everywhere. Here it is. The Cook County discussion is talked about, with startups on Chromeway, Factom, and Velox. I think Velox was the one with Cook County, respectively. Peruvian economist Hernando de Soto, who has also been involved in the project, has estimated the worldwide the value of, quote, his term, dead capital, close quote, in which people do not have land title to their houses, cars, and other assets at $20 trillion. To Hernando de Soto, Mystery of Capital, read the book, folks. Big insight. This is the Geneva-trained economist out of Peru. He explained this thing on dead capital. He also explained on what the power of the West was as its system of records, the county clerk, the integrity of those records, the system of laws, that the evidence that the county clerk was protecting was in a courts that would use the law applied to the facts of the evidence to protect the property, was what they destroyed in MERS in 2008, I think it was. That this guy has been behind the scenes of it all again, and here he pops up on the paramount danger I'm telling you about. This is, I guess, the big deal for me was to see he pops right, but he's not gone away. Everyone haven't heard of him. He's been working the whole time to make dead capital valuable to whom? Not you, and not the property owner, to them, the they. And what he talks about, if you didn't get it, he says the dead capital is which people have no legal title. They're going to steal your legal title, and they're going to say you have none. This is the new administrative function. Those in America, they have legal. They also have beneficial title. See, he's only speaking to one half the title. That's where the government or some party owns the legal interest as a dominant party, and you get the benefit to use it. See, in America, what's patented is both legal and beneficial interest. And they're telling you here, this blockchain will be listing only the legal title handed to control, but not necessarily benefit. Who benefits? The benefit's going to be taken by the people who own the blockchain and the system of laws that covers it. And they make you the legal holder. You only have part the interest. They're taking even the beneficial use if this is correct. And they then put you into dead capital. If you have already legal and beneficial title in Cook County, how is this system able to be applicable to you is the felony that they're going to do against you all. Everyone, everywhere. So here it is, just one paragraph. And I'm glad I remembered that to go read it because this was a thought in my mind. You better go find this guy. Hernando de Soto is the globalist economist that predicted how to take down, he analyzed how to take down the United States of America, the most unique property system in the world that actually worked and worked for the reasons I've laid out. He's part and parcel to these projects using Bitcoin, which I'm telling you folks, whether you see the ramifications, you think the technology is cool, I'm saying stop looking at the shiny thing. Stop looking at the good part of what that does. You have to look at what these people are using this weapon for and how. So they start rebranding. This is about renaming things, folks. This is all about getting you to buy in, public buy-in. You hear, remember, William Roberts used to tell you this all the time. Public buy-in to these things they fabricate. This is an alternative to your regular lawful life, folks. You choose, you voluntarism yourself into this this process because you don't assert that it's a crime against you. Rebranding is a process that goes on all the time. To me, it's just, that's why I say be careful on getting yourself into places that you're going to get renamed. You want to be separate. You want to be non-attached. But you have to work in a unified way. And the only way I can figure that out is that we work, even though it doesn't look like it's being used, we hear law is working, you just have to work it. That means you have to understand it, and then you have to work it correctly. I'll say this is the same dead cracked record over and jump and skip over and over. Why? Because it's the narrow path. It's the narrow path we have to go, because if we get off of it, they beat us up. They take us they drag us into the dark, deep, dark woods of their creation, and they beat the heck out of us. And so rebranding has been important in this alternative to dispute resolution. They create this false question, oh, we got to have control of our dead capital. And then they attach it to you, and you don't have dead capital. You folks in America have your patents, whether you know that or not. They're already there. You just got to go connect yourself up. This is just land. You have title to other things too, and you have to understand how to do that. How they pull you out in your traffic, in your cars, what you call motor vehicles. You don't even know how they do it there. Just they've, like in a couple states, they've actually said you can't even make a donation because a donation is a transfer of interest. Well, what about the possession, folks? See, the courts will split a hair on you, and you don't even pay attention. And you have to know to assert, well, that violates my possessory right. You mischaracterized by doing that. That's a fraud. You took a color of authority, and you've diminished me. You have no authority to do that. Did you understand that was the case? No, they rebrand what you have. They restate what you do. And you don't correct it. And they do this all for your benefit. And you say, wait a minute, that's not a benefit to me. That's a theft. That's a plunder. That's a terrorism. That's a treason. And not just out there saying, oh, the cops are the terrorists. No, you have to create the evidence for it. That's the other thing they've done to you. I keep telling you that's not supposed to have been done. There's prima facie things you work from. There's factual things that can't be refuted even as prima facie. They're just what are that can't be refuted. We don't return to this. So this process is a global process as we move through, finding out that Hernando de Soto, the very guy that predicted how to destroy America through its destruction of its land laws and its systems, and the Bar Association was in there the whole time. Don't get me wrong, like I'm focusing on this one guy. Everyone's working integrated, but you don't see it. This fell back over to a viability in another topic, totally outside of what I even look at. Somehow it popped up, and I don't remember how, on the Twitter feed. Some guy, his name is Dr. Wahid Uden, and let me see if I can get this now. Maybe I can't. I'll have to paraphrase. He was a consultant or some author relative to the UN, and yet he speaks as a heretic to the climate change, global warming condition and imposition. And through his statement, I was able to broach the idea of what the condition is. Now, I understand this is a Twitter, and I took, in responding to 3 people, 3 Twitters where I only had, because you only have 140 characters, everyone that was involved in the conversation was listed. Those take away the characters from you. I had a very short amount of discussion to make. But this rebranding is part of a process that this gentleman was pointing out, this doctor is pointing out I'll read it. CO2 causing global warming is failed IPCC hypothesis, but any type of carbon tax is snake oil scam based on failed climate change conspiracy. He was responding to somebody called Pure Climate Skeptic that said the Baker-Schultz carbon tax plan is a bad deal for Americans. The doctor comes back and says that it's a snake oil scam. Climate change, it's a failed climate change conspiracy. So for me, this guy's already in league with what my belief is, but I'm realizing they're tying into the branding of this thing, and now they're getting into the argument over it. And I've told you all, don't do that. Don't step into an argument when you can go find the answer before and walk in with the answer. And I watched a lot of people through, you'll get my link here over to this Twitter feed. Not a lot, but a handful of people engaging in the argument of whether or not the evidence for or against was factual or not, or whether it was right, or all that nonsense. I'm looking at this feed going through, and everyone's trying to prove their point. The guys that believe in climate change trying to support it, and the ones that are trying to show that their graph is the more important one. And I'm looking at this saying, well, these people aren't really even talking to the problem. They aren't even addressing what the underlying issue. They get you focus on the shiny thing, and you forget what you're involved in dealing with. In a few emails, Twitters, I came in and I broached the idea that this was part of a consensus process, which is a felony against everyone. And the gentleman or I suppose he's a gentleman, a guy responding, came back and told me he tried to redefine, reframe, rebrand what consensus was. And he said that consensus is a high value of agreement that a theory is accurate. And then he proposed an example called plate tectonics, which was surprising to me because I didn't realize at that time until he said that plate tectonics is a consensus-based theory. So that was pretty cool. I get to now know it's just guessing by a dolly, which I have my own reasons for why I believe there's a possibility for that, and there's some reasons otherwise. So he came back to try and rebrand what I know consensus is as a crime, a felony against us. That was consensus by itself. And he tried to say that consensus was a high value of agreement, that some theory was valuable. I came back and I don't address his fight. I don't address his rebranding. I went to the next step. I said he doesn't, and I understand he doesn't understand this. He didn't understand what he's dealing with in consensus. He's trying to prove his point. And I say, but your consensus is part of an alternative dispute resolution process, which is also a felony against everyone. The point is, I didn't allow him to reframe the discussion. The point is I'm sitting in a factual foundation that he apparently, I think he knows, he doesn't want to admit. He wants to reframe so that he gets us off the point and back into his being able to argue and continue a non-existent and fabricated issue, one that a doctor who deals in the UN has identified as snake oil. Well, after I put that in, one of the other participants came in and says, well, you have to understand that this one that was participating with me that said that consensus was, scientific, he has a guinea pig for a picture, an avatar. And another participant came in and says, after I talked about the secondary felony that consensus is a part of, I won't allow him to reframe it to some nonsense definition. Someone interjects and says, put down the shovel, mouse man. He was saying, this other guy, stop digging yourself a hole here. And that other guy, who is now a PhD sociologist, understood the guy didn't understand what I had just done, and that up until now, nobody's coming back with countervailing facts to dispute what I'm saying. That the next conversation was that the believers of this would get together to promote the belief. And I came back to answer and clarify that. Because we can look at that, and we can think that we're talking about the believers and leave it into somewhat of a snide response, and put it into the religious context, and we could call people names. Or we can come back to and define and show reframe it, rebrand it back to the fact of what everything is. And I said, those believers equal stakeholders. And they're the tool that ADR uses in order to be a felony against you. Now, I got a lot of favorites on that conversation. I had nobody come in and clarify, correct, or rebut my position. In 3 tweets, I explained you all are in a anytime you go in any kind of consensus, it is one of the tools that they bring as a scientific proof in an alternative dispute resolution process that are both felonies, and the agents that they use are called stakeholders, the people that have an interest in the outcome, like these 3 companies in the Bitcoin, marshaled by Hernando de Soto's view that we can create dead capital by destroying all the titles. And we're going to get our way. That in 3 tweets I was able to go through the process. If everybody was looking at that and understood what I said, they'd understand what the mechanism for our destruction is. And instead of going after Bitcoin or embracing it or going after the protesters and the DAPL, and instead of taking on identities, we'd be saying, hey, we got an organized crime going against us, and we can identify one of the methods that's going on. That I will give you the link. It's very short, and I'm really, in a way, I'm really kind of, if I can say pleased, I was able myself to reduce a very complex subject matter, certainly more than 3 little tweets, not even the full tweet. And I was able to direct and educate people if they were willing to continue to go look, that even a UN author found no fault in, a PhD sociologist found no fault in, actually confirmed the fact of the guy that was trying to resist what I had just done. To not allow the rebranding, to not allow the discussion, the dialogue to be stolen by somebody and then changed. Is your mission, if you accept this, that I think reduces our problems to such a smaller, more controllable area, because all I'm looking for, really seriously, is did these people, this authorita, who interjected into a system I know exists. I'm not questioning what that system, I'm not in fighting with that system. I accept that the United States, and it wasn't proved to be by my analysis, Hernando de Soto told me this. I accept his analysis. When I realize he's a globalist usurper, he's going to tell, they don't lie to you folks. You can just take this to the bank, what they say. Okay, I didn't truly appreciate what I had here in what's been set up in the United States of America regarding land, and it extends over to your other property rights and remedies and things. It is what underpins that organic document where the government is supposed to sit to protect life, liberty, and happiness, which we understand is actually the property and the right to acquire property. And that all underpins your right of contracts, which the Constitution also protects on a number of ways, like the protection of the obligations against impairment of those obligations and contracts. So this little thing was really, I was feeling pretty pleased, not just in the confirmation of non-rebuttal, but how simply 3 lines could explain our condition. And so I want to contribute that again. Something else, I don't know what to tell people. I'm working really, really hard to figure out how to simplify these very complex conditions. And please do not believe that when you see what I say, you think you understand it. Just know that just take solace that you now may have a fingerhold on the cliff of the stinking abyss that you can then use and concentrate, focus your attention there. Identify that everywhere you look. And when you do, you've got really a simple path. You expose the person who's trying to assert that as someone who doesn't have the right to do so, and then you get them in an official capacity, and then you show the harm to what you have right to, and now you've got them in the felony. And you have to find that on a state-by-state basis. This state-by-state basis is very interesting, but it's also, I think, a way that divided up the universal, it divided up how these centralized locations called state would treat certain concepts. And it allowed 50-something different, or in all the territories, abilities to obscure all these things. That makes this a little difficult. Why? I have to tell you, yeah, it may have been a good thing to live from one country to the next called states, but you have to find in your state what I'm talking about. And I'm just not that well read. I'm not that much. I've always wished to have people I see. There's some people that really I appreciate immensely. It's interesting that we never really get together. I don't know why that is. As I could bounce off information, they can show me where their state, we could actually get together and have this knowledge readily available. But it doesn't seem to work that way. And so I'm not going to cry over spilt milk on this or whatever, the non-connection or the lack of cohesiveness, but I understand that we're going to have it. So here I felt really good that I was able in 3 short tweets to explain one of the things that we're up against, and impliedly in there is how you beat this thing, how you expose it at least first, and then you persist to beat it. It's an education process. This ADR thing has been with a friend of mine who took this on in his area. It's taken 3, almost 4 years, bit by bit, to get the information out. He actually has a broadcast time that he can do with a regular terrestrial broadcaster, and this is an education process for the whole of the people, hopefully giving them information over time to give them the foundation they need to act more properly. So there's ways to address these things, and they're called, there's ways to look at how this works. And even within the oppression, there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. And in this case, where there's a law, there's a legal, and there's a loophole, you may be able to take advantage of that. So this next notice shows us a couple things, no different than the professor engaging the courts and finding how literally criminal they are. And he's a professor, and I wonder how much he tells his students about that fraud that they're training to engage. But and neither here nor there. There's ways to get involved, and you have to have you really have to have a different type of spirit and be willing to take on a hardship. But for those of you that are intrepid enough to do so, here's another example. This should have been on the other side of the crickets to this point, but in some regard it's not, because he's actually still getting hurt, and I would hope that he learns maybe how to stop this. And this is a different dynamic on making the record that shows harassment and retribution and retaliation against the government, that sets up a case that he could take all this green money he's now getting through this loophole and actually go after someone and in earnest, not just do the legal loophole, but actually go prove that they shouldn't be messing with him once he found one. This pot entrepreneur is fighting prohibition and winning. On a busy D.C. street corner on a cold afternoon, a Mercedes-Benz sits parked outside a storefront window. There are other cars parked on the street, but this vehicle stands out, mainly because it's covered with pictures of marijuana plants and has Kush gods written in huge, whose inflection are we going to have here? Huge lettering across its side. 2 police officers stand nearby, watching the car with stone-faced expressions and crossed arms, but there's nothing they can do. An older man, a few young professionals, and a woman whose balding head is wrapped tightly in a scarf are all lined up at the car's passenger side window. Some look nervous as they spot the officers across the street, but the women in the car smile and assure everyone that they are doing what they're doing is perfectly legal. Now, in Washington, D.C., it's selling marijuana is illegal. And these people, this guy, who's apparently he does rap for what he really wants to do, he found out that when because Congress rules Washington, D.C., remember, it's not a state, and this is the big distinction here. When we get back to your territorial jurisdictions, that I want you to go back and do the study at Cornell and start seeing this. Washington, D.C., and then interestingly, the sleight of hand corruption that goes on that actually makes that place relevant, but in an independent way, a non-dependent way, within the constitutional confines of Article 3. At least purportedly so, because when we went there, we found out that the Article 1 court that you'll find in their section that's spoke about in the district form of 28 U.S.C. 88, which is was the thing I told you that I think I was trying to hand you an answer, but is actually a territorial court stepping in, and the Article 3 court's not available to you. And so there's little distinctions here that you need to really see, but he sits right in that. He sits in that little district. Extend that out to your district courts, the district there, and he's figured out that when the Congress came in and tried to told the government there that they were not going to be able to use marijuana sales as a taxable substance, that they figured they were going to interfere when the people of Washington, D.C. voted to supposedly legalize it. Well, that all got kind of messed up, but this little obstruction, prohibition to the government about taxation still sit, and it was about sales. This gentleman noticed, as we did long time ago, this is where you started to learn, well, maybe if I take a gift instead of making a sale, or I take a donation instead of a sale, it's not a sale. And that's true. And that's what this kid does. And now, to support his rap music business, you can make a donation to him in the first Mercedes, and then you give a description then a description is telegraphed by phone to another car half a block away, and you, as the one giving the donation, goes down to the other, and as a gift for your donation to his rap music, he will hand you, the Kush gods will hand you a gift from heaven, apparently. Has been sufficient to move through the battlefield that's been set up against marijuana there. Now, it's not, here's the point. Now, he's done it. He's done it for 2 years by the story. I'm just going to read by paraphrase here as I remember it. However, in that 2 years, the government keeps beating down. They steal his Mercedes over and over. They've taken his fleet of Mercedes, and he still persists. Within a few days, he gets them back. So that, to the point that he's done the so-called loophole, he's prevailed. At the point that he's still taking hits, he hasn't. And so, not to say that this is to solve his problem, but he has to make a record of these and compile it, and then address that, whether or not he does that. And in District of Columbia, I'm not sure where he would go, which court, but he has to find the court he needs to go to. And then he needs to sue to stop him as retaliation, for retribution. Whatever puts them completely without excuse, takes away their immunity. And so this is like a mixed thing. I thought this was great. Someone looking and bringing up the old idea. Within the tax law, you can take a donation and a gift, and that's not really making a sale. As I was telling you before, where the Georgia Republic said, hey, just having a couple, 100 and something grams is self-evident proof that you're not in sales, and therefore immune from, or exempted from imposition. And so this was an interesting little tale. I appreciate this guy standing up and doing what he thinks is right. Now, again, I'm not taking a position one way or the other on the marijuana, except that now that we see that there really is a benefit, medical benefit, what the government is doing is a crime. That's just, I guess I'll put that much out. Otherwise, I think at some point I've seen in my experience of watching people participate, I thought the word dope might be a good angle. I know I just got a bunch of people attention, and I probably got a lot of people coughing, but not that it actually does that to everybody. Everyone I've ever seen that actually gets into that really becomes a lot less active somehow. And that's how a long time ago I said, well, that's not me, and that's not about me, and it never interested me. Now, what has interested me is when I see this stuff, and now in particular we see it's that the oil, the proper oil, actually has some medicinal value, and keeping that from people, it's one of the crimes, the highest crimes that I can imagine that people in government can do. It's not the government, it's the people in government. As we move on, and I keep telling you how you properly do all this is to make your meaningful comment and on-point comment made where you need to in this situation of an administrative world, this technocratic movement into these things where everything becomes centralized. In other words, that's the blockchain. And we now see that globalists are involved behind it that worked and identified how to destroy your country. And they're doing it. That from the inside, a long time ago, this was done for other reasons. We can go through the lineage. I guess people are out there that can give this information to you better than I do. I don't do those documentaries. I've come to the idea, once I can see the crime, why do I have to continually identify that these people are criminals, and how? Why do we do that? Why do we waste so much time building up stories about how this is so wrong and these people are so bad and all this is going on, and we can predict how bad it's going to be when we already know that? Why are we looking in and wasting more time to build documentaries and talk about how this all interrelates? I decided, no, as soon as I see the harm and the arrest, I don't care who the criminal is. I don't care who his cohorts are unless I can get them in conspiracy and stop them too. And if that's why you're making your lists of things, all I need to hear is the lists, how you got there, and then hand them to someone that can do something with it. I don't need to know any much more than that. And so we're wasting a lot of time on all this as well. That I've asked, and I didn't get, I still haven't gotten a response, which disappoints me a bit. that the DEA was making this rule condition about getting it removed, the marijuana removed from the status of the level 1 or whatever the heck it is. But DEA drops. So I didn't hear anybody doing that. And apparently this rule might have gone in or is already applicable. I don't think that ends it. You can all jump in and do this because we have some more information coming. But this is where we also have a lack of response on things that I thought people would be interested in. And it's no jeopardy to anybody. So I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. This is even easier than traffic tickets. DEA, but so someone pushed this whole issue. What are the claims by the government? Can they put those claims on? Or they have the authority to actually put false claims on a website? And what's the tool if they don't? Is there one? The DEA, though, on challenge. Again, this should have actually been on the other side. But because they're not following through to remove this, it's still, to me, not quite done quite right. We're getting closer. DEA drops inaccurate cannabis claims from its website. Well, there's another thing that pops up. Again, I could read all this, but they bring up a neat little thing. Again, I see this is notice to us. If we didn't know before, start looking for these things for the tools. The change of removing this came after a nonprofit advocacy group, Americans for Safe Access, filed a legal petition, and they give you a link to it so you can see it if you haven't done this before, calling for the DEA to remove the incorrect claims. Filed on December 5th. Well, that's pretty quick. That's not years and years and years to get a result. Filed on December 5th, petition argues that the misleading statements, among which that cannabis can cause psychosis, lung cancer, and permanent cognitive damage, violate the Federal Information Quality Act. And there's a link designed to ensure integrity of information published by federal agencies. Did you know there was such a thing, folks? If you didn't, here's a way at these people. You start seeing what did Trump just do but take out the climate change? If it's false, I guess they can't prove it, so they had to pull it out. They're here now. This is about the problems of wrongly saying what cannabis can do. This is a way to get at any of these agencies that wrongly claim or cannot support their point. Again, this is notice of what you can do. Why people aren't stepping up and doing that, I am just astonished. Unless one of the things about the negative things about dope is that that's what it does. Please rise up beyond that. I don't know, folks. It's not for me. I'm just saying, why aren't we acting when we have an answer now? I mean, I'm trying to show you over these months. No, I don't. If one of you or two of you are doing something, I apologize. You didn't tell me. I asked you to tell me. But I assume that anybody who's been doing something does somehow contact me, even if late. And I can offer what I can. That stuff I can't. I don't have anything to say. I don't hear anybody saying, here, this is what we filed. Or, here, what do you think about this? We're going to file this. So I don't believe any of you are all stepping up to protect your own selves. And in one regard, because of the medical thing, I'm wondering why we aren't caring enough about others to do that as well. That here it is, we can take false information out, and it may not be the full answer. But as soon as you start taking out the foundation of the false, and then they have nothing to support that there's negative, all of a sudden it starts to make their claims that there's nothing going on a whole lot more dubious, which then now comes up in another report just hitting the news. Pot has some medical benefits, U.S. academies say, but obstacles to research loom. Well, let's forget the obstacles to research. We find out that's because of the interference of the government agency itself. And I would say underneath that Information Act, that should violate that act if they're getting fraudulently interfering with information. Work out what you can underneath that act for those of you that want to do, but there is conclusive and substantial evidence, in quotes, out of the report that marijuana or related compounds can effectively treat chronic pain, nausea caused by chemotherapy treatment for cancer. And I hope you picked up that clue with the woman who was wearing the tight wrapped scarf that she has balding head. That's what she's probably curing here. And in the other story, and spasticity caused by multiple sclerosis, according to a report published today. It was 2 days ago, I think it was, by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. the 395-page report with a link, and I went there, but you have to sign up to get it. I don't do all that sign-up stuff. I think it's free on PDF, if I remember seeing that right. You just have to sign up, make an account. But there's a report now, and there's 10,000 research abstracts in the review. And I want to remind you about the abstract is not the total evidence. It's only a report, a summary about that evidence. And the scientific literature on cannabis is very comprehensive and balanced, says Igor Grant, who directs the Center of Medicinal Cannabis Research at the University of California, San Diego. Grant was not on the committee that reproduced the report, but he provided feedback as an independent reviewer. And I would say, if you're going to get into this for yourself, those of you that want to help, look very carefully at all these little details. They all mean something, and they can be used or addressed or attacked. Everyone has their own perspective. It may not be the one that actually needed to be. And one of the observations was that nobody in these research, they could find any consistent or at least statistically significant question was formed. There was no one way to get at the questions, and so all this non-consistent questioning causes these differences to come out, which is another form of a deception in a way. It's not a scientific study, but it looks like it. See, everyone gets their money to do all these different questions, and it may not be what you need to validate certain things. Listen, if it's bad, we want to know it. If it's good, then why are we being obstructed, and why does it take so much? The DEA actually gets interferes with this. But this report is available to you folks. It's there. It goes through and suggests there are good things about it. I think in the chat, BLM chat, Cowboy Tack was putting up stuff about the, again, this information comes back. I don't know how long ago I was talking about it, but that the government holds a patent on good use of cannabis. And so, and the comment was made in one of the stories, well, that's not illegal not to present. I go, yes, it is. It's fraud. The information integrity would say you have to present that, wouldn't you? And why aren't you making that argument anyway over this other expert's opinion? But this is a fascinating little story about the fact of the report. I don't put value one way or the other. I'm saying, for those of you that don't know what to do and want to be a part of what's going on, instead of just complaining, the evidence is all around us to address these things. And the government that you have is the one you've been allowing. I don't like that we have to mind the government at this point, but we've let it go so far. They're now into literal treason. It's so far. And it's unarrested. The stinking abyss, folks. It's the caucustocracy on us. And I keep suggesting, I don't understand. I can see how, if I have a bucket of water, if I want to empty that water, I guess there's a plan that if I throw a rock into that bucket, some water comes out. If I throw another rock into that bucket, the more water is going to come out. So I can empty that bucket, in a sense, by throwing something in. Well, I'm wondering why Trump is throwing in a bunch of turds in order to try and empty the swamp. Is our problem. Now, I'm hoping that guy goes in the right direction. We're going to take I told you, the little mouse hole we're being allowed. We're really attempting to do what little bit we're going to have in order to make life better for people, while the destruction comes in our face. And I'm hoping we can do enough of that, and we can start educating people on preparing actually for the future destruction again, or the worsening of the oppression, that they can weather it enough that maybe enough time will pass that actually somebody can do something about it. And in the meantime, you're educating yourself on how to do that. This story goes on a little bit more. There's a lot to it. More evidence, folks. It's that there is a competing position for those that need this herb, this plant. It really is outside of the control of the DEA, but they made this special branding of it as a Schedule 1 law, unlawfully it seems to be, as a Schedule 1 thing that they can get out of the commerce stream. And then they violated your property rights to be able to produce the stuff, which we see the Republic of Georgia actually saying, listen, you're not in commerce if you don't do certain things, and someone just carrying a few grams is not enough. Not Grammys or Gramsies, no grams of the stuff. But then we have the problem, well, what's the limit when you have the right to do it, and it's not. It's farm to market, and market's not the commerce. And if it's a donation setup, we see one guy has a little bit of an answer. Yeah, it's a loophole. Okay, well, I will use any weapon if I can. But remember, he got beat down a bit. You're going to have to weather that oppression. And I'm asking him, through my statement here, maybe protect yourself with a better record, then really go after him. Take all that green you have in your pocket because you can't go to any bank with it, and start protecting yourself. You got the dang Mercedes with a really nice paint job on it. Why don't you do something to protect all that? And expose this thing. You're sharp. You're a sharp guy. Why don't you go to the next step? So we have this study, and remember I told you there were abstracts, and then this next story comes out from John Rappaport just this morning, and it says, boom, thousands of medical studies found to be useless. Boom, thousands of medical studies found to be useless. Memo to medical bloggers living in mommy's basement. Now, John goes through all again. I won't read it. You can read it for yourself. This, though, you have to hear, it deals with a particular failure. Now, it may or may not be relevant to the report that they just reviewed and gave you abstract to, the abstracts of which may not tell you what they were studying. But if any of those stories regarded cell lines and the substances affecting cells that they are looking at toxicity over, they may, and let's say a toxicity was found, those may be and probably are a faulty review that may be part of that prior report. And if you can find that in something that claims it's a harm, you can defeat that one inside that rule and defeat its evidence contrary to the benefit. If I said that correctly. I think I said that correctly and understandably. You're going to defeat, you rebut any report, abstract of information, and you go to the report and you see they used studies of toxicity using cell lines. You can rebut the accuracy of this. And this, John's report here tells us that the journals know of these failures. They're actually promoting it. So let's say, again, these are not government officials, that you can't use, I don't know if you can use that other act to stop them because that's for government agencies, but you can show that their stuff is not correct and fraudulent on the uptake if it becomes an acceptable piece of information in the government. Now, the issue here, he says, cell lines. The cells are crucial for lab research on the toxicity of medical drugs and the production of proteins. Knowing exactly which cell lines are being studied is absolutely necessary. And therein lies the gigantic problem. And I'll interject here. Remember I told you your enzymes and protein production, the collateral attack the collateral defense by a cell when you're attacking the cell, let's say through genetic engineering, will produce these unintended proteins and enzymes. And so we already have, the central point here is named here when he mentions the production of the proteins, which are really in part controlled by the enzymes that are causing them. But getting back to the statement, statenews.com has the bombshell story. You have a link in this list. Quote, recent estimates suggest that 20% or 36% of cell lines scientists use are contaminated or misidentified, passing off as human tissue cells that in fact come from pig, rats, or mice, or in which the desired human cell is tainted with unknown others. But despite knowing about the issue for at least 35 years, the vast majority of journals have yet to put any kind of disclaimer on the thousands of studies affected. I'll go on, you can talk about it, read it. I don't want to do that. Thank you, John Rappaport, for exposing this. I want to put this in application. I'm going to take this to the bank with what he does. He's supported it by something. You can proof it out. I don't have time behind which to do all this. I'm just going to get to the point of how you use it. Given you go back and read that, you go prove this point out, you then attach that point to the other reviews and the other study that were used. You find out if there's any toxicity studies that could have been tainted by this fact. You bring that to rebut those things in that document in the other report, and then you bring forward and you say, okay, here's what's going on, and your comment, your proof, your evidence to that agency to out that they are not creating lawful information that they're making decisions on. Therefore, their decisions aren't based in science, first of all. Secondly, they're arbitrary and capricious. And that's the minimum stuff you talk about. And so here I'm trying to, again, show you, I'm not just talking rules and law. I'm saying, listen, we have a thing to do, and there's a way to go about it. If you never heard that before, That's our problem. We should have never not known how that was supposed to work. That we are imposed to do that, I don't like it. We shouldn't have to be. These government officials should be obligatory to a fiduciary. We've let it go. They aren't. We have to bring some accountability. I'm suggesting if you get involved with the administrative side of this, it won't be a threat, and you'll learn how to start the communication process that makes you effective, and it stops you being a whiner and a discusser about all the harm is on us and who's done it and the who done it and how they all done it, and never get to the stopping of it. I mean, this is pretty clear. On our Jefferson Mining District website, we say we don't need no Cobb job legislation. We actually don't need any legislation. The land disposals are fulfilled. What we need is actual immediate accountability for the trespass to that, the treason, the making war of those fulfillments. I don't need another law. I just need to have a system that will do what Hernando de Soto, the globalist, said. If you take away that system of law, or you take away the courts that recognize law, or the records, or you destroy those records, you destroy the whole thing. Very, very intelligent man. And he proved it, and he proved it in 2008, and he's right here to prove it again, and where they're going and how they're going to take away your property. He takes away the evidence. Even if you have a court, see, you don't have the right. You can't enforce it. It's just an interest now. No possession. You have nothing to prove. No signatures of people. See, a dead entity, the undead don't have hands, folks. They don't have blood. I hear all these converts say, "Oh, I got a free man on the land with blood or whatever the heck." No, it's nothing to do with what you say. It's what the other side can't do as the entity it is. That you can. That's the self-evident proof of the distinction. When you come in with a signature and even a thumbprint, if that's what you're going to do, the government can't do that. That's a status that's outside, self-evident outside. The first one who trespasses, that is the felon. Are you going to get accountability? Probably not right now. We proved that in our lawsuit. So now what do? That's a bigger argument. Because the argument is, it isn't clearly done. The argument is who's going to do it? 3 of us can't do it. 5 of us can't do it. Thomas Jefferson was correct. It takes the educated mass at some point when you let it go too far. Now so we refute the conversation. We refute their studies by the fact of our educating ourselves to how they duped us, how they're covering over the crime, how they get their identities constructed, how it looks like it's real and in fact it's a fraud right in your face. In other words, this ADR, this is Alternative Dispute Resolution. I was listening to a broadcast just quickly here on how they constrained a legislation that the Republicans were going to stand firm against the Democratic majority, and they were only going to let the Democrats do one of 2 things. In this case, we're either going to, as a Republican Party, we're going to allow you to choose between your transportation plan or your carbon tax plan. Now, the shiny thing is the carbon tax, because most people don't understand the seriousness of a transportation plan. But what do we say? That doctor from the UN said, this is snake oil. And so we have a Republican agreeing to let the Democrats choose between snake oil and something maybe not perceived to be so important, but is more important and dangerous. That it didn't matter. I'm listening from the air, I mean, just like anybody else is listening, and the Republicans have allowed the Democrats to choose between 2 pathways to destruction. It doesn't matter whether they take the carbon tax or the transportation plan. In the transportation plan is the carbon tax. In the carbon tax is the admission the transportation plan has to be implemented. So the Republicans standing back and telling you that they take the fine, strong line is a lie. The shiny thing is the carbon tax, the system and process you've missed. Because by them allowing this fabricated issue to be decided as an alternative is the felony called Alternative Dispute Resolution. And they're doing it in the legislatures right now, in your face. You want to talk about transparent? That's what transparent means. It's felony in your face. You don't even see it. You don't even know you're being harmed. If you can't identify your harm, you don't have a cause. You don't have standing. These people are brilliant. I really have to feel really interesting on how the dynamic works. That this identity, this lack of ability to see it, the requirement that there's data that's being applied rightly or wrongly, the acquisition of this data, and we never question it, is really, again, our lack of assertion of the what we ought to see better in the world. Again, it makes it much more difficult that we live in the battlefield America, but that brings on their ability to do the next thing. We talked about the blockchain. We talked about going to cashless society. And you think that's a shiny thing too. All the groupers that we are, the school of fish that we is, swimming around in this ocean waiting for the shark to come eat us. That we just allow. So we think all of us in a big group are going to make it work because we look like a bigger fish apparently. But every once in a while they can come and nip a few of us out, like the prairie dog analogy. That they're working on other things. They're not only going to go cashless, you ain't going to get into the store. Unless you plug yourself in, you're not getting into the stores. Here's the first evidence. Retail store demands everyone submit to cop-run facial recognition before gaining entry. You want to get something to buy? You're going to have be identified by the cops. No, I'm not a criminal. I got nothing to worry about. You're not listening. You're not paying attention. It's not about that. They can fabricate. They can indict a ham sandwich and get a conviction. I don't know why you don't have a question with that. So to get into this store, now listen, they gave a plausible reason why they have to. The reason is at night, the increase in crime has gone up. And the cops aren't there to stop crime. They're there to take the report. And so this is a valid, at least on the surface, reason why they need to do this. They don't want people coming into the store after dark, and it threatens their workers. They get robbed a lot, and then they find out that their workers don't want to work the shifts, or they quit. That's a problem for an employer, a slave master as well, if you understand, again, how this thing is all set up against us. That they claim they need the right to do facial recognition. I can give them that reason. And when they instituted this, their problem went away. But that's the plausible reason. It's like using the youth, the children, the women, and the indigenous. It's the same problem. That we need this protection, and business has the right to make that decision. They require you to identify yourself through facial recognition. 1/10 of a second, they got you in a police file, folks. But they then allow you into the door. If you don't do this, they don't let you in. And they do this only after dark. And so here's your thing. Here's your voluntarism. You either go in after dark if you want to go in after dark, and you're going to have to get your face captured by the state to go buy something. We haven't even got to the cashless society yet, folks. You're even getting in the door to use your cashless society. But this is what they're already pushing on your access to places to buy things. Now, so there's a little out here. And I think you're going to have to notice this. I think there's always going to be an out somewhere. It may be refined to like 2 minutes. You've got to get in and out in 2 minutes. Anytime. What this is showing us is after dark they institute the program. I guess you have a choice to not go in after dark. And when you do, you would submit, you agree. That you now then would limit to stop this. You're going to have to be cognizant of when you can and when you can't. That's a phrase society, isn't it? Oh, you're free to go at this time, and you're free to go at that time. And you're free to go even when they take the picture, but you're going to have to get recognized by the cops. The same cops that we've identified are running a system of organized crime, organized crime trafficking, folks. You're submitting yourself to this, and I hear crickets on it. So, word to the wise, and this is all tied up to the real ID as well, folks. This is a national thing when it goes to the cops. Do not underestimate the problem with this. A local store is implementing it and already tied to the national system. Technocracy's getting it, folks, and you're not saying what you need to say. You listen and you hear me behind you, but you're listening, but you're not hearing, and you're not hearing into the point of action, and that's where I'm getting to the point I'm wondering whether or not, I said it was a foot race. I don't know. It's getting close. I actually may not make it to fruition the more this is moving on. As I told you, I'm just shocked. I don't think about it too hard because it makes me a little bit upset. Spent over a decade and still can't get people to understand what a grant is, what it means, and how to stop anybody from trespassing. It's just been I don't know, folks. I'll never bring my phone on an international flight again Neither should you. Well, that should have been obvious, folks. I don't understand why these people write these stories, but in a way I'm glad they do. For all the crickets, they give you the idea. Here's another notice. Don't do this. Or, and actually he brings up an interesting point, for those of you that have your electronic devices, wipe them if you have to do this, and you don't attach the TSA and what they're doing, as I told you should do years and years ago. He tells you to put your stuff on the cloud, which they want you in anyway, but at least get it off your phone, so when the TSA orders you to give up your password, and interestingly in this report here, he identifies that the border is no man's land. There's no constitution, no law, no nothing. The TSA God is God. And you will be indefinitely detained. I hear crickets, but you will be indefinitely detained, despite what I've told you you can do ahead of time, but you will be indefinitely detained if you don't give up your password. That he also says if you do have to bring your phone, maybe use the cloud, don't have anything on your phone. But it's a pain. But that's the way they've worked it. And so you are going to have to look at what time it is and what rights you have when you go ahead because you didn't stop it ahead of time and you're agreeing to this nonsense. I found this a very interesting tale. I said no duh here. I mean, what the heck you thinking, dude? But it's a story of an experience, and apparently we need to know it. We need to hear this because we're not so aware and we're not so we're clueless to really what our action ought to be, that we'd rather walk in front of the bus and hope we survive than to figure out how not to walk in front of the bus. This is really astonishing to me when I start thinking of it that way. Okay, so you got facial recognition, you got the TSA border guards everywhere, they're the cops anyway. It's already real ID, it's all national as it is. This latecomer, late bloomer says, I should have never brought my phone on an international flight, or at least had it where I had information on it. I guess he didn't get the memo about the NASA engineer who got threatened with indefinite detention either. If you think that there's even people in the government in which you would think that high places in government functions that are immune to any of this, although that NASA employee was probably the one only that it should have acted upon. That's another cricket action. That we now move on to facial recognition. We have tied into real ID, national to the store to get into do business. Forget your cashless society if you can't walk in the door. We have the thing about they take your phones, and then this is talking about what was interesting about the story about the phones is you think that America is the free place, and near the end of the story he actually starts talking. It's really fascinating what people know and don't really respond to. Not necessarily that it's all one and more important than the other. It's all seemingly important for different reasons, but the U.S. isn't the only country that does this imposition. It's only a matter of time before downloading the contents of people's phones becomes a standard procedure for entering every country. Remember, folks, that your life is in these phones. I mean, everyone you contact now is susceptible and vulnerable to this intrusion by these people. So you are now responsible for your friends or those people you communicate with, and everything that was ever said, or all the pictures that were taken, and all that stuff, even the programs that you use. He says this thing about that entering into the country is already in the United States, and this also already happens in Canada. Again, supposedly the free, how they got people mind melded into the hive already. The most free nations in the world, the United States and Canada, are the ones that are already doing the oppressive action. And then listen to this, which has kind of caught my mind. We think that the United States is the bastion of freedom. You're free to do what you're told is what you're free to, folks. You're free to pay exactions of every kind. Those of you that went to the Cornell site, type in 42 USC 1981. You'll see all your civil equal rights right there. You're right. You're free to pay exactions of every kind. And it's already happening in the United States, this oppression, repression, destruction. It's already happening in Canada if you think that these places were free. And you can bet, it says here, the countries like China and Russia aren't far behind. Meaning, until they are actually more free to go through than the United States, the bastion of freedom. It's the freedom, folks, really. Crickets, too. Free crickets. And in Canada. That was near the end of that report. Little tidbits of knowledge we can ignore to our peril, if not already. AI-powered facial recognition, folks. It's going to be everywhere. AI-powered body cam gives cops the power to Google everything they see. Now, Now, say Taser has started its own in-house AI unit, laying the groundwork for police body cameras that record fully searchable video evidence. Now, in some regard, this is kind of cool, and for all y'all documentarians that want to just retell the story over and over without ever getting to stopping the harm you keep documenting, this could be pretty cool. But the police body camera industry is the latest to jump on artificial intelligence bandwagon, bringing new powers and privacy concerns to controversial technology, bolstered by the need to hold police accountable. You see how they did that to you too? Hold police accountable after numerous high-profile killings of unarmed black citizens. Now, that tech is about to get smarter. Now, so that's a notice to you. Your cameras are going to be everywhere. Real ID, National Enemy Combatant Registry is everywhere now in these cameras. Going to get better, but I wanted to point out something about how they brand something and how it might not be, it isn't so, and we give over the power and we don't realize that it's not AI powered. I would take issue with that. Artificial intelligence right now, as I can see it, and I think even the industry agrees, and we did this report here months ago, that what you're actually looking at with current AI is actually pattern recognition. It's not actually intelligence as we understand forming a thought, an idea, coming to some term. It's the ability to quickly run through consistent patterns, and then coming up with the highest probability that that's who it is, which is the other problem. It's a probability. It's the same thing that climate change is working on, statistical relationship. This is your science-based life, that they take these pictures now and they'll search Google. Google's, to do no evil, or whatever the heck that statement was, not exactly don't do evil. They are the epitome of what they said that they would be not be doing. This is not AI, though. This is actually fast-running pattern recognition systems. And if we start allowing these people to brand this condition as artificial intelligence, well, you will be demeaned below the level of an IQ challenged IQ 80 cop, for sure. Again, the Supreme Court says you can be too smart to be a cop, be too psychologically stable to be a cop. That's not my definition. IQ 80 is what it reduces down to, despite the fact they go to university. And no one noticed that the blockhead courses were pushed up from high school into third year of college. So you only have 1 year of anything kind of beyond. So this technology is coming along. It's doing things we don't understand. We're told that they're branded to do certain things, and I'm not so sure that they actually do all that. I think we need to make it real. These are just pattern recognition systems, and they're getting very good. I don't want to underestimate that, but they're not artificial intelligence as you might think a thought or a memory being used. This technology also, we don't know how safe it is. I want to move on quickly to wireless power transmission, safely charges devices anywhere within the room. You need to see this only because this harkens to Tesla, and they bring him up. But understand when they tell you that you're inside a resonant cavity, and they're talking about microwave frequencies, or they actually are they're very careful not to say microwave, that you're now going to be sitting in rooms that are essentially microwave cavities, and the power is going to be emanated and placed on the standing waves that are created that your device will pick up. So in the future, you won't have wires, but you're going to be in this cavity that's irradiating you, and they're going to claim that it's okay based on what cell lines they've checked on this frequency, which I can tell you, if you listen to the Dork Table and Larry Woods, they don't have a clue on that. They don't analyze for all that, and to tell you the truth, I don't know what all the good stuff is. I have some ideas, but what we think is, this sacred frequencies, folks, you better really sit down and figure all this out. It may not be true either. We're told a whole lot of stuff. So anyway, they're preparing for you to have wireless connection within rooms. They're going to get rid of some of the walls that make it look like it's not a microwave resonant cavity chamber, and you're going to be sitting in that in energy that they're claiming is good for you. You can believe that as well as you can believe read the product insert of a vaccine. That's not up to me. That's up to you. It's up to us to protect ourselves and act accordingly. Otherwise, they will do what they will do. Thank you for tuning in today. Remember what you do. RealLibertyMedia.com. Then we have Freedom's Network. Sign up, folks. Social network. Let's get together, do some things better. Jules at UCY.tv. Thank you very much for your broadcasts and past casts, and then your rebroad over there on Thursday, and terrestrial broadcasters. I do appreciate what you do there. And folks, it's just a matter of over and over that you have something to do. I'll be here next week. Heck diffs and nature willing. Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the host of Anti